Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wheeler, in your testimony, you said the notice of proposed rulemaking adopted in May proposes a solution based on Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act. In fact, that seems to be your position throughout most of 2014, a 706-based approach. In fact, you testified on May 20th of last year in front of Energy and Commerce Committee that Section 706 approach is sufficient to give the FCC what it needs for an open internet. And as late as October 30th of last year, the Wall Street Journal wrote, and I quote, "Chairman Wheeler will move forward with a 706-based approach." Now, back to where the chairman was. All that seems to change on November 10th. So the question, where you state publicly that now Title II is definitely in the mix, and that's ultimately the direction that the commission took. So my question is real simple. What changed between October 30th and November 10th?
Mr. Jordan, I think that's an incorrect assumption.
I'm using your statements, Mr. Wheeler, and I'm using what the Wall Street Journal get it right, or were they wrong?
So on February 19th, I said that we keep Title II authority on the table. The commission has authority to use Title II.
I'm not disputing that. I got 3 minutes. Hang on,
there's a laundry list, sir.
Hang on. Yeah.
Where I said that.
But your testimony, I'm quoting from today's testimony you just read. The proposed rule was a 706-based approach, and the Wall Street Journal, as late as October 30th, said a 706 approach was what Chairman Wheeler was going to move forward with. It changes on the 10th. What happened between the 30th and the 10th seems to me 2 events. One, the president made his YouTube video and commented and moved towards a Title II approach, and he issued his statement. And 2, you had an important meeting with Mr. Zients on November 6th.
I think that's an incorrect assumption, sir.
I'm going from the timeline. This stuff you provided.
Let me quote from the New York Times the day after the Wall Street Journal saying there are 4 options on the table.
You can respond when I ask you a question. That's how it works. All right. So now let me just go through where the chairman was earlier, your interactions with the White House. March 6th, FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler meets with Jeff Zients. Now, here's where you get to answer something. Who's Jeff Zients, by the way?
He is the head of the National Economic Council.
Okay, at the White House, right? An assistant to the president for economic policy. He's got this long title, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you meet with him on March 6th. March 7th, FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler meets with the White House economic advisor Jeff Zients. May 7th, meeting with Jeff Zients at the White House. May 21st, Tom Wheeler meets with Jeff Zients at the White House. June 11th, Tom Wheeler meets with the Economic Council's advisors at the White House. June 18th, Wheeler meets with Jeff Zients at the White House. September 11th, Tom Wheeler meets with Jeff Zients at the White House. October 15th, Tom Wheeler meets again with White House economic advisors. And October 28th, Tom Wheeler meets with Jeff Zients at the White House. So again, leading up to October 30th, you've met with the White House 9 different times, all at the White House, with Mr. Zients, who's the assistant to the president for economic policy. And up through October, the position of the commission, according to the Wall Street Journal, according to your testimony in front of Congress, is a 706-based approach. That changes just a few days later. And I would argue it changes on November 6th, when again you met with Mr. Zients. But the one difference here, Mr. Wheeler, the one difference here is 9 times you went to the White House. On November 6th, Jeff Zients comes to you. As I look at the record, this is the only time he came to you. And my contention is, and I think where the chairman is, and frankly where a lot of Americans would be as they look at this record is, Jeff Zients came to you and said, hey, things have changed. We want the Title II approach to this rule. Now, am I wrong?
Yes. First of all, there may have been 9 meetings, but I'm telling you, I listed them a moment ago, and I won't go through them again.
No, there are 9 meetings at the White House where you went to the White House. There's one meeting where Jeff Zients comes to you.
Dealing with trade,
and the meeting when he comes to you is right before everything changes.
Dealing with auctions, and, as I said in my testimony, before there was any input, there were multiple issues on the table, including a Title II and 706 approach.
I got 29 seconds. Hang on one second,
but what I'm trying to, it is a mistake to say that the only thing that was on the table was Section 706.
I didn't say that.
I thought you did.
No, I said 9 times you met with him, and you had testified in front of Congress, 706, in the Wall Street Journal report, that's what you were going to do, and then it changes a couple days later.
And the Wall Street Journal report was wrong.
I got 11 seconds. In your testimony, you say, I want to be clear. There were no instructions from the White House I did not, as CEO of an independent agency, feel obligated to follow the President's recommendations. One last question, if I could, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wheeler, who is Philip Verveer?
He is a special counsel in my office, senior counsel in my office.
Your top lawyer, your top advisor, senior counsel.
He's an advisor, yes.
Okay, well, this is an email our staff had got with Mr. Verveer and a lobbyist from AT&T on the 10th, the day this all changes, 4 days after Mr. Zients came to you. After you went 9 times to the White House in the course of a year, Mr. Zients comes to you, everything changes, and this is what the AT&T representative said to your senior counselor: this is awful and bad for any semblance of agency independence. Too many people saw Zients going in to meet with Tom last week. So I'm not the only one who thinks everything changed on November 6th. This individual talked to your senior counselor and said things changed on November 6th, when again, the White House came to you and said, Mr. Wheeler, new sheriff in town, things are different, it's Title II from this point forward. And that's ultimately what you all adopted. Even though you had a 706 plan all this time, you ultimately adopted the Title II approach.
We did not adopt the President's, we did not adopt a Title II approach. We adopted a Title II and Section 706, which I believe, I can't read it all, but I think it's referenced in the first line of that email.
Jim,
Independent agency, and this guy says...
the gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
With all due respect, the gentleman just went over a minute and a half, and at least I would ask that he be allowed to answer
Sure.
that question. Unanimous consent. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. There were, and as I was pointing out, the New York Times actually wrote the day after this Wall Street Journal article, quote, that hybrid, quote, is one of the 4 possibilities the FCC is considering as it seeks to draw up a net neutrality framework that, unlike the last 2 attempts, will hold up in court. The Title II and 706 usage, as I said in my testimony, was on the table along with a Title II and 706 non-hybrid, along with 706, along with Title II by itself.
Mr. Chairman?